is a scene of awesome power. A flash of blinding brilliance. A devastating shockwave. And the spread of the mushroom cloud. At once beautiful and horrifying. Though wars have raged throughout human history, with the creation and proliferation of nuclear weapons, we are now capable of destroying our world. Today, 9 nations possess this terrifying power. From the original members of the nuclear club, the United States, Russia, China, Britain, and France, to India, Pakistan, Israel, and now, North Korea. The ability to cause massive nuclear destruction has moved from the domain of major nations to those of small countries, groups, and even individuals. And today, building a nuke is not as hard as you might think. Today, with about 15 kilograms of enriched uranium, a talented engineering graduate student could build a simple but potent, dirty bomb. The equipment to make the bomb is available commercially, and the design information can be readily found on numerous websites. It would be portable, about the size of a softball. This weapon could be placed on the back of a truck or on a boat and have the potential to wipe out a major city anywhere in the world. Since the creation of nuclear weapons, the threat of using them has acted as a powerful deterrent and as a status symbol. In the Middle East, Iran and some Arab nations are striving to develop their nuclear capabilities. Yet one Middle East nation has possessed nuclear weapons for more than 40 years: Israel. How did this diminutive nation end up with one of the world's largest and most secret nuclear arsenals? It is a story of spies, collusion, and deception. Just one of many that typify how nuclear weapons have spread around the globe. The Israeli nuclear program begins hand in hand with the French program in the 1950s, when Israel and France decide they cannot rely on the American nuclear umbrella. In 1957, covertly aided by the French, the Israelis begin work on a top-secret complex at Dimona, deep in the Negev desert. The Israelis will provide the technology and scientists, while the French will do the industrial heavy lifting. But after U-2 flights reveal construction at Dimona, America becomes suspicious. The Kennedy administration demands that the Israelis open Dimona to American inspection. They plan to send representatives to examine the facility, hoping to be reassured that the Israelis are not secretly building a nuclear weapons program. But they were. So Israel comes up with an ingenious plan. The Israelis decide to build a fake control room. It is equipped with phony dials and counterfeit meters that look like those of a legitimate research reactor. The American inspectors, who do not speak Hebrew, are given a tour of the facility. They visit the imitation control room. The parts of the facility are walled off, so visitors to the control room don't know the size of the real plant. The American inspectors are told they cannot visit the reactor for safety reasons. In fact, the Israeli facility contains an underground reprocessing area with secret elevators the American inspectors know nothing about. The Israelis are literally developing their nuclear program under the feet of the American inspectors. Experts believe that by the time of the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel had already assembled 2 nuclear devices. Israel is a secret member of the nuclear club, and if push had come to shove, Israel would be able to detonate one weapon in Egypt and another in Syria. Israel has never admitted having nuclear weapons, nor has it signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, citing its unique security needs. Although Israel has a nuclear arsenal, it believes it can't let Arab nations develop one. On June 7, 1981, it emphatically makes that point to Saddam Hussein. During the 1970s, Hussein consolidates his power in Iraq. He is determined to possess nuclear weapons. By the end of the decade, he partners with the French to build a nuclear reactor to produce weapon-grade plutonium. The reactor is located at Osirak, near Baghdad. Ironically, it is built by the French, who helped Israel build the Dimona reactor. In 1981, Israel learns that Osirak is about to begin operations. In a daring raid, Israeli fighters fly through Jordanian and Saudi airspace unchallenged, speeding only hundreds of feet above the desert to avoid detection by radar. They approach the reactor, releasing a fusillade of 2,000-pound bombs. The Israelis bomb Osirak into oblivion. The attack occurs before the facility is up and running to prevent fallout. Israel secretly expands its nuclear arsenal while refusing to acknowledge its nuclear capabilities. But in a little-known story that equals anything Hollywood could have created, that facade is shattered forever in 1986. Mordecai Vanunu is a mid-level engineer working at the Dimona facility. He is opposed to Israel's nuclear weapons program. Vanunu secretly makes sketches and photographs of the plant's top-secret material and takes them to London, England. Vanunu tries to sell his story to the Sunday Times. They are impressed, but before publishing it, they must verify its facts. While he waits for a go-ahead from the paper, Vanunu spends time wandering around London. But Vanunu is not alone. Israeli agents are following him. He starts a conversation with an attractive woman. They meet the next day. She convinces Vanunu to go with her to Rome, where her sister has an apartment. And when they arrive...
Hi! Here we go. You must be Mordecai.
A week later, Vanunu is in Israel, at Mossad headquarters under arrest for treason. In London, his revelations soon hit the front page.
They were published in the Sunday Times, which was a devastating political blow to the Israelis, because it was a full disclosure. Not only they had A-bombs, but the pictures make it clear they're working on thermonuclears, they're working on neutron bombs, they're doing all sorts of things.
In December 1986, Vanunu is put on trial for treason. He receives 18 years in prison, 12 of those in solitary confinement. Today, a face-off between Israel and her neighbors could bring a nuclear holocaust.
The Iranian government and its proclamations and its past involvement in terrorist activities is not the type of country you want to have nuclear weapons, even despite any of the theories that there are about how they would be deterred. It certainly calls for pretty grave concern.
Elsewhere, the Taliban have their sights set on Pakistan's fragile nuclear arsenal.
Pakistan has well over a ton of nuclear explosive material, mostly highly enriched uranium or the weapon-grade uranium. It has some plutonium, it has nuclear weapons, and it has facilities to make all these items.
While in the Far East, North Korea tests its nuclear weapons.
North Korea is now a nuclear power, and that much more dangerous, that much more difficult to deal with, that much more unlikely to be willing to settle for terms that the rest of the world would think would be the right terms.
The world could be closer than ever to a nuclear attack. How did we get here? How did these terrifying weapons spread around the world? The road to Armageddon begins on the eve of World War II, as Nazi Germany and America race to develop the first bomb, and the fate of mankind hangs in the balance. In 1933, Hungarian physicist Leo Szilard envisions a nuclear chain reaction, one that could be used to produce energy or to fashion nuclear weapons. Szilard's theory galvanizes physicists around the world.
In 1938, two German chemists were bombarding a solution of uranium with neutrons and then checking if there were any chemical changes, and discovered, to their immense surprise, truly, totally unexpectedly, that there were elements in the solution that shouldn't have been there.
The neutrons had actually split the uranium, resulting in an unprecedented and massive release of energy.
And very quickly, all over the world, everyone understood that if you could put in a little energy and get an enormous amount out, you could make an incredible bomb.
Less than a year after that discovery, World War II explodes across Europe.
The great docks of London were left roaring infernos.
The combatants know the ability to produce an atomic bomb may mean the difference between ultimate victory and defeat. In America, at remote locations across the country, the Manhattan Project, a top-secret program, is racing against Germany and Japan to build the bomb first. Some of the world's most brilliant physicists, many of them refugees, are working at its weapons lab in Los Alamos, New Mexico.
The scientists at wartime Los Alamos did not really know what was going on in Berlin. They suspected that enormous progress was being made because that had been the core.
Their concern is justified. The Allies know the German effort is serious and may soon bear results. But the Germans need heavy water, stored at the Norsk plant in occupied Norway.
To make a reactor work, you either need very pure graphite, carbon, or you need heavy water as a moderator. The Norsk heavy water facility was enormously important in the history of the war and really the safety of Western civilization.
In a daring commando raid, the Allies destroyed the facility. When the Germans try to move the remaining heavy water to Germany,
The existing supply had been put on a ferry crossing a fjord, and they blew up the ferry, even though there were some Norwegian citizens aboard the ferry who were killed. But it was that important all around that this material be prevented from reaching Germany.
But the Germans are not the only enemies seeking world domination. By the 1940s, the Japanese are also racing to make an atom bomb. Professor Yoshio Nishina, a former associate of Albert Einstein, is put in charge of the Japanese effort. On March 9, 1945, America sends 300 B-29s over Tokyo. In what's been called the most destructive bombing raid in history, napalm set 16 square miles of Tokyo ablaze. More than 88,000 Japanese die in a single night. But there is another hidden goal behind that attack. The bombing also wipes out the Japanese nuclear facility, just as its thermal separator is ready to go online. The Japanese have one hope left. They request nuclear materials from Germany. And in March 1945, 1,200 pounds of unprocessed uranium is dispatched to Japan. But in transit, the sub is informed that Germany has surrendered. It surfaces and is taken into custody by American forces. The fact that it contains half a ton of uranium oxide is covered up. Japan's hope of developing the bomb first disappears. 2 months later, in Los Alamos, New Mexico, after years of furious effort, America's Manhattan Project scientists are finally ready to test the device they call the gadget. Years later, Project Director J. Robert Oppenheimer reflected on that fateful day.
We knew the world would not be the same. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
It is the birth of a new age. But what the leaders of the Manhattan Project don't know is that the designs of their bomb are already in the hands of the Soviets. For the Soviets have secretly infiltrated Los Alamos. In 1933, after a violent encounter with the Nazis, Klaus Fuchs, a brilliant German physicist, escapes to England. When British officials review his file, his anti-Nazi sentiments convince them he is not a risk. He begins work helping the British develop the bomb. But secretly, Klaus Fuchs is a dedicated communist.
So, a contingent of British physicists was sent to Los Alamos from England. We didn't vet their security. We assumed the British would vet their security. Each person was allowed to know only what they needed to know to do their job.
Yet the most sensitive area at the weapons lab is occupied by physicist and spy Klaus Fuchs.
Oppenheimer said later that if Los Alamos had been infinitely compartmentalized, Fuchs would have been in the inner compartment, because he worked on the implosion, the squeeze of the core of the Fat Man bomb design, the very center of the effort to make plutonium useful in a nuclear weapon.
In August 1945, the atomic bombs that Klaus Fuchs helped develop are dropped on Hiroshima, then on Nagasaki. More than 200,000 people are killed.
In the biggest celebration the Windy City has ever seen, joy is unconfined.
The war finally ends. But unbeknownst to America, 2 months earlier, Klaus Fuchs provides his Soviet courier with a detailed sketch of the plutonium bomb, including its components, dimensions, its outer and inner layers, essentially everything the Soviets would need to make one themselves.
They had the design for the bomb. They had the design for the uranium enrichment systems. They had the design for the electromagnetic separation systems.
For more than 40 years, it was believed that Klaus Fuchs was the only physicist at Los Alamos who was a spy. But in 1995, it was revealed there was another. His name is Theodore Hall, the youngest physicist at Los Alamos. In 1944, Hall gives the Soviets essential information on implosion bomb designs that validates the data from Fuchs. His contacts are American communists Morris and Lona Cohen.
Morris and Lona Cohen worked basically as couriers to take information from spies in various places, transmit it back to the Russian embassy in New York.
In 1945, Hall gives Lona Cohen blueprints of the bomb exploded over Nagasaki.
These she hid in a Kleenex box that she was carrying with her at the train to go back east. To her horror, she realized that there were Army intelligence people checking everybody's luggage. She had the plans on her person. Thinking very quickly, in fact with amazing cool, she pretended she'd lost her ticket, began crying, pulled out a Kleenex to blow her nose. The agent came over, she handed him the Kleenex box, which of course left him thinking there was nothing involved with that. And after she was through and she found her ticket, he handed her back the box. That's how history is made.
With materials provided by Fuchs, Hall, and others, the Soviets are able to explode their own nuclear bomb.
When the Soviets tested their first bomb in August 1949, a great surprise on this side. We didn't think they'd have a bomb for another 5 years at least. There was panic in Washington. There was a sense that the balance had been tipped.
It was the beginning of the global arms race. Every major country would henceforth be either a member of an exclusive club or a frustrated wannabe. The nuclear arms bazaar was open for business.
Put on goggles or turn away. Do not remove goggles or face burst until 10 seconds after the first light. 10 seconds. 9 or 8.
In the 1950s, America begins concentrated work on hydrogen bombs, also known as thermonuclear bombs.
The United States was beginning to fire very successful, large, portable thermonuclears in the Pacific.
These stupendous weapons of mass destruction are about 1,000 times more powerful than the atom bomb dropped on Japan. In 1954, in the Bravo test at Bikini Atoll, America explodes the largest thermonuclear device ever detonated. The Soviets don't yet understand that technology. But they will. For besides Klaus Fuchs and Ted Hall, the Soviets had another highly placed agent at Los Alamos. His code name is Perseus. After the war, Perseus stopped spying for the Soviets. But in the 1950s, they need him again.
Perseus was a mystery. Basically, in the late 40s, he went out of business. He stayed at Los Alamos. He made important contributions to the worlds of physics. And I think he washed his hands of that background until the Soviets tapped him on the shoulder in 1954.
Thomas Reed believes that Perseus gave the Soviets the key information they needed to build a thermonuclear bomb.
In the case of thermonuclears, it only takes one luncheon and a few sentences to explain the secret if you're talking to Soviet scientists that are very good and know what they're listening to.
In November 1955, armed with the top secret information they need, the Soviets once again shock the Americans, detonating a two-stage thermonuclear weapon at their testing site in Kazakhstan. The arms race between America and Russia is about to flip into high gear. But they aren't the only ones desperately working to develop nuclear weapons. China is also secretly in the race.
Then came war from the north, unprovoked and without warning. In June 1950, the North Korean Communist...
As the Korean War erupts in 1950, China has good reason to covet a nuclear weapon. When Mao Zedong inserts Chinese troops into Korea, President Truman and later President Eisenhower threaten China with nuclear weapons.
Mao decided to proceed with nuclear weapons in '55, and the first step was years of collecting graduate students, sending students overseas, sending Chinese scientists to American universities and bringing them home again. It was building a solid foundation.
Part of that foundation may have been laid earlier by an American physicist named Joan Hinton.
Joan Hinton worked at Los Alamos. She was an integral part of the nuclear design team. She was at the Trinity test.
But the Trinity test worries and horrifies Hinton. She is a communist and believes the West shouldn't have a monopoly on this new technology. In 1948, Hinton moves to China and makes contact with Chinese communists.
Joan Hinton had access to nuclear weapons design information, so she took her knowledge with her to China. She clearly had the knowledge and could have helped China in the very beginning.
Hinton says she moved to China to renounce the United States and get away from the atom bomb. She maintains she did not share secrets with the communists. Today, she works at a dairy farm outside of Beijing.
I do not have the smoking gun evidence, but she was there, she was close to them, she had been integral, and to this day she lives in China. It is pretty clear to me she has got to have briefed the Chinese scientific community as to what went on at Los Alamos.
Mao is also receiving assistance from the leader of the Soviets, Nikita Khrushchev, his ally against the capitalist West.
Khrushchev's help to the Chinese was not to just send them some drawings. It was to send them this huge army of talent and the superstars from the Soviet weapons lab. They gave lectures on uranium mining, milling and processing, uranium enrichment, building reactors, weapons design, hydrodynamics, high explosives, the whole schmear.
The Soviets are about to hand the Chinese a prototype of the bomb. But in 1958, when Khrushchev visits Mao to finalize their nuclear agreements, relations sour. Mao is displeased with the Soviets' desire to control Chinese foreign policy. Khrushchev advises Mao against invading Taiwan, fearing nuclear retaliation by America. But Mao informs Khrushchev that mass Chinese casualties don't bother him.
And they then talk about Mao's attitude towards nuclear war. And his attitude, you know, we could lose a few million in China, so what? Khrushchev said, this guy's lost it, and we're not going to support him anymore.
Khrushchev has second thoughts about arming such a heavily populated nation on its southern border, a country which could become a future enemy. He starts removing his scientists.
The key people begin to leave on vacations and don't come back. And the Chinese that we talked to said, you know, we're getting all this data, except, you know, the reactor won't go critical.
The Soviets have been feeding the Chinese fraudulent data. But Mao and the Chinese are about to get the right information from a very reliable source. None other than Klaus Fuchs, the former Los Alamos scientist who had spied for the Soviets over a decade earlier.
Nuclear technology spreads in wondrous ways. Klaus Fuchs was a wartime spy. He was arrested, confessed, but he was sent off to the Slimer for a decade.
In 1959, Fuchs is released from prison 5 years early for good behavior. He moves to Dresden, East Germany, to teach physics.
But who did he teach physics to? One of his first visitors that summer was Gyeongsang Ken, the head of the Chinese nuclear program. And Klaus Fuchs, clearly in the summer of '59, gives the Chinese a full briefing as to how Los Alamos worked.
In 1964, after steady and measured advances, China fires its first nuclear device. And by 1968, it achieves full thermonuclear status. China has joined an exclusive club, one whose members now officially include America, Russia, Britain, and France. But other nations want to join the Big Five in the hope of commanding respect on the world stage. Two of those countries are mortal enemies, India and Pakistan. In 1971, when civil war breaks out in Pakistan, India enters the conflict and deals Pakistan a humiliating defeat. That war galvanizes a deeply patriotic Pakistani to seek revenge. His name is A.Q. Khan. Khan is a metallurgist, expert in the manufacture of centrifuges, cylinders used to enrich uranium for use in nuclear weapons.
Khan didn't design the bomb. What Khan's skill was, and this is always crucial to making a nuclear arsenal, was in developing the technology for enriching uranium. He's the one who learned how to use, in this case, centrifuges.
Khan lives in Holland, working for a Dutch company involved with uranium enrichment. He decides to secretly help his homeland.
He began to collect nuclear technology in Europe because that's where the technology was being developed to enrich uranium for reactors. He started taking notes in 72, 73, 74.
Khan has access to one of the most sensitive and secret nuclear facilities in Europe. And although he has limited clearance, security is lax, and he walks into highly restricted areas. Then, in May of 1974, Pakistan and the world are shocked when India detonates Smiling Buddha, its first nuclear bomb. India sends a menacing message to its neighbor by setting off the blast near the Pakistan border. Khan begins passing highly classified nuclear information to a network of Pakistani spies in Holland. In the fall of 1974, Khan spends 16 days at a top-secret nuclear plant. He freely wanders the facility, taking copious notes. These notes and drawings make their way to Pakistan. In the meantime, though, the Dutch have become suspicious of Khan. But when they move to arrest him, they are stopped by the CIA, who want to track his activities and associates. In December 1975, Khan flees to Pakistan, carrying in his baggage top-secret copies of centrifuge blueprints and contact information for nearly 100 suppliers of nuclear weapon components. Through the next decade, Pakistan will work to develop a nuclear bomb behind the walls of this secret facility at Kahuta. But it won't have to work alone. Pakistan will have help from a foreign friend, China. For China's leader, Deng Xiaoping, is deeply invested in helping Pakistan against their mutual foe, India. With the help of China, Pakistan tests its first nuclear weapon in 1998. A new member of the club has joined its ranks.
So the bomb design was in fact a Chinese bomb design. And the first test of a Pakistani bomb was actually conducted in China.
But China is not only helping Pakistan. Deng Xiaoping begins the deliberate proliferation of nuclear weapons and materials into the Muslim and Marxist worlds.
But he also began to proliferate secret reactors into Algeria, missiles into Saudi Arabia, all sorts of technology into North Korea.
Thomas Reed believes Deng Xiaoping had an ulterior motive.
Why? Why does he pump it all into North Korea? Why does he arm Algeria? Why is he sending all this stuff elsewhere? I happen to be of the view that the Deng Xiaoping view was, if as a result of all this spreading technology, there's a nuclear detonation somewhere in the Western world that doesn't have Chinese fingerprints on it, that's in our best interest. The Chinese will be the last man standing.
The horror of nuclear war has kept it from happening, so far. But we've already had one close call, closer than anyone realized at the time. On October 15, 1962, American reconnaissance photographs reveal Soviet missiles under construction in Cuba. President John F. Kennedy demands their removal, but more are on the way. The United States initiates a naval quarantine to cut off their arrival. The crisis grows daily. No one is backing down.
We were truly so close to war. I myself was a witness of sorts, you know. I was in the intelligence. I was based in the United States at the time. And as I watched the Soviet ships approaching Cuban shores with missiles on, I thought that was something who will be the first to stop.
But America has a hidden asset in Moscow.
One of the sources at that time was Colonel Oleg Penkovsky, who had very close relationship with the top Soviet military brass at the time, and he was the one who passed information to the United States, from what I learned, which allowed the White House to take a stand.
Penkovsky tells Washington how many missiles the Soviets have, as well as crucial details on problems the Soviets are having with the missiles' guidance systems. Penkovsky's information proves the Soviets aren't as strong as they want America to believe. This gives Kennedy the confidence to stare down Khrushchev. But unbeknownst to either leader, there is a hidden aspect of the crisis occurring literally just below the surface. A story only revealed to the public in 2002. America doesn't know that the submarines guarding the Soviet ships are armed with nuclear weapons.
There were ships following ships. The freighters that were bringing the missiles were being escorted by submarines that were nuclear armed. And they were being trailed, unbeknownst to them, by very silent U.S. submarines that were nuclear armed. And all those skippers had their fingers on the triggers. It was very dicey.
The Soviet subs have been ordered to launch weapons if American forces attack them or try to force them to the surface. But during the most critical moments of the confrontation, that's exactly what is happening. For U.S. forces are dropping small depth charges over the Soviet submarines to force them to the surface for inspection. Submarine B-59 is one of those targets. The bombardment goes on for several hours. Oxygen runs low. Temperatures reach 120 degrees. Sailors pass out. The Soviet sub-commander orders their nuclear-tipped torpedoes armed.
The Soviet commanders on that sub seriously considered launching one of their nuclear torpedoes.
That could have resulted in an all-out nuclear war. But the commander of sub B-59 controls his anchor and orders the sub to surface for inspection. The next day, the crisis ends. For the next 2 decades, the escalating arms race between the United States and Soviet Union will reach fever pitch. The burden of financing its nuclear arsenal is one reason the Soviet Union falls apart. When it does, the safety of some of the world's most secret and dangerous materials is at risk.
The interesting thing about the Soviet Union's breakup in '91 is on 2 fronts. First of all, nuclear weapons were all over Ukraine and Kazakhstan. 6,000 nuclear weapons. It took 5 years to convince them to take those weapons, sell them back to Russia in exchange for something else. It was money, it was fuel for their reactors, it was other favors and so forth. It was getting off the U.S. target list.
It's one thing to control the actual missiles. It's another to control the fissile materials that make them work.
Suddenly, this material was scattered everywhere. The records weren't particularly good. We were then...
Washington Times reports that the shipment is 120 pounds short.
And so they produce tons and tons, and they know where 99.9% of it is. That's nice, but 0.1% of several tons is still enough for dozens of nuclear weapons.
And in the late 1990s, that could be a very big problem. For uranium, nuclear weapons equipment and technology are very hot commodities in the world's black markets. And the father of Pakistan's Islamic bomb, A.Q. Khan, is running the show. A.Q. Khan returns in triumph to Pakistan in 1975. By the mid-1980s, he and his associates have reportedly made millions selling nuclear weapons equipment and designs.
He sort of opened a nuclear Walmart in which he provided all sorts of nuclear technology to the countries that the U.S. probably would least prefer to have it, and specifically Libya, Iran, and North Korea.
Khan's network includes other scientists, engineers, and administrators willing to sell their country's secrets to the highest bidder. But money isn't the only object. Islamic Pakistan also helps others of its faith, some of whom are enemies to America. Following the attacks of September 11, 2001, it emerges that 2 Pakistani nuclear scientists with close ties to Khan met al-Qaeda leaders in 2000 and 2001. The Pakistani scientists had been trying to smuggle nuclear materials from Russia and Central Asia to al-Qaeda. There have even been reports that in April 2003, A.Q. Khan journeys to Afghanistan to meet Osama bin Laden.
Well, the intelligence community had been trailing Khan for 20 years. That's really a sorry story, that the U.S. intelligence community knew what Khan was doing for 20 years, but they never told the operations people to go arrest him or shoot him.
The United States had turned a blind eye to Khan's activities because of Pakistan's help in combating al-Qaeda and the Taliban. But now, it's about to pounce. In October 2003, a German ship bound for Libya's secret nuclear weapons program is intercepted by American intelligence. It contains centrifuge components for enriching uranium, part of a complete nuclear weapons program that Khan has sold to Libya. Responding to international pressure, Pakistan arrests Khan. He confesses to selling nuclear technology not only to Libya, but to Iran and North Korea as well. The Pakistani government denies any knowledge of Khan's activities, and President George Bush officially accepts that explanation from President Musharraf, his partner in the war against the Taliban. A.Q. Khan offers a public apology.
I have chosen to appear before you to offer my deepest regrets and unqualified apologies.
The Khan arrest and confession is a great piece of theater. Mr. Khan was clearly made the scapegoat. The whole Pakistani military, industrial, laboratory, scientific world were all involved in this scam to transfer technology.
With Khan as the fall guy, Pakistan's military government doesn't have to acknowledge its complicity in proliferation. To Muslim states for ideological reasons, and to Marxist states simply for money. America's most vital ally in the war against terror has been selling nuclear technology to Islamic terrorists. At his palatial mansion, A.Q. Khan is under house arrest.
So he's locked up in a very glorious castle where he eats peanut butter sandwiches for 4 or 5 years, and the U.S. Intelligence Committee cannot get at him. He was not under arrest. He was in protective custody. Big difference.
The CIA and others wanted to question A.Q. Khan in his sort of luxurious confinement. And that was a request denied by the Pakistani government for pretty obvious reasons, that there was no real benefit to them and possibly a lot of harm if the CIA got into the issue of how much support did you have from the Pakistani government.
Khan is pardoned in 2009, but the damage has been done. Some of the most dangerous nations in the world are now armed, or could soon be armed, with nuclear capabilities. The secrets of the nuclear bomb have been passed around the world by governments helping their allies, by their supporters, and by their spies. For more than 70 years, the world has had to deal with the ominous specter of destruction by nuclear weapons. And that fear is still with us. The more countries that possess the bomb, the greater the uncertainty.
As long as there are nuclear weapons in the world, others will want to have them. That's the first axiom. And the corollary is, and sooner or later they will be used.